Thanks so much for tuning to another episode of the CIS podcast. I'm here with my friend Ross King, and today we're going through the fourth of the four ingredients. So, Ross, let's recap those ingredients.
Yeah, sorry. I can see that I took t-shirts to my last gig, and there's a box of open t-shirts behind me, and now I realize there's just t-shirts on the floor.
Well, there'll be a link
Anyway,
below where you can purchase those shirts. So
there you go.
yeah,
There
it
you
was a
go.
cool, backhanded pitch. That's
Oh,
all.
I
It's
had
fine.
t-shirts and merch back here that are
They're all
on
right
sale
there.
on my website.
Available now.
Sorry. So
Link below.
the four ingredients, according to me, the four ingredients to a successful time, career, whatever, in the creative field of songwriting are raw talent. Can you do the thing you're trying to do? Can you sing? Can you play? If you're an artist, can you draw? Can you paint? Whatever. Do you understand the medium? Two would be work ethic. How hard will you work? Will you be teachable? Will you put in the hours? Will you take critique? That kind of thing. Third would be suck meter, quality control kind of thing. Can you honestly assess your work, the work of others? This allows you to say, oh, I need to improve here. Oh, I can see what's available out there with other people and aim for that. And then finally, how are you in a room? Meaning, all kinds of rooms, on a stage, in the studio, in a co-writing situation, selling people on your music, elevator pitching, that sort of thing. So those are the four things. We've covered 2, 3, and 4 that I just said we have not covered raw talent. And I kind of wanted this to be last because in some ways it is kind of the bad news, good news one, because you can't really change whatever. Raw talent is measured right now by where you are when you first hear this podcast. Or, Meg, if you're learning about this now and saying, oh, what's raw talent? I would say, well, however talented you are right now, that's the answer. Like, you're probably not going to change it a lot. It can be refined. That's by very nature, raw talent can be refined. But just like you would say, when you find a piece of rock that has some gold in it, you can refine and mess with that rock, but it's not going to have more gold. It's just going to be more, just going to be shinier and look more like gold and be easier to assess as gold, right? You can weigh it more honestly, whatever. I'm not a geologist, but I'm saying it's just like, if you find some amount of oil, when it's crude oil, it's not going to be more oil when you get done with the refining process, right? So whatever you have right now, you're not going to get more, like probably not, all right? It's what you were born with, what you were sort of taught in the early stages of your art, whatever. And that just sort of takes hold. So that can be kind of bad news for those who are like, I don't have much raw talent. I don't know if I have any, But today, what I want to talk about is two things: how to figure out kind of what sort of talent that you have, and that won't take super long to have that conversation. But then what to do, now that we've covered the other three, what to do with those other three to complement and supplement that raw talent to make the recipe of the four the most sort of potent and powerful recipe that it can be. Make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I love that concept of like, there's a rock with gold in it, and you're not going to change. No matter what you do to it, it's not going to create more gold. Now, in theory, you learn how to cultivate that gold, and you can find other pieces of gold, which are other elements. Because that's the thing is, it's not like
Right.
we're talking about raw talent of songwriting only, raw talent of artistry only. They're going to have different quotients of raw talent within the many layers that it takes to be an indie artist and songwriter. So we're going to kind of cover the filter of all that.
Yes, that's a terrific point, because you can be someone who is only a little bit good in one area, but your medium can have like 5 or 6 or 10 or 15 areas that influence it, right? So you could say, Ross, what is your raw talent as a singer-songwriter? Well, that's two different things. And I'm an okay singer, and I work on it and I refine it, but my natural ability as a singer is not very high. And I've spent a long life trying to make it better, and I've refined it, right? But I also have songwriter, and then you get into, well, can you produce? What can you play? What kind of styles can you play? You need whatever. So those are all like areas of my raw talent. And again, we'll get into how the other stuff kind of plays out. So I would say that basically the whole raw talent piece, if you're like, how do I know? Well, you probably can't know exactly any sort of quantitative, measurable raw talent, right? But this is really just about when we look around and we see how much people have struggled to get good at something versus how they sat down and became good at it pretty easily. And most of us have seen that in our own lives and in the lives of our peers. And the thing about raw talent is it's often kind of about a floor and a ceiling. So like there's a floor of like, can you do this at all? People are tone deaf, right? Or something, right? So they don't have any singing raw talent probably because they are tone deaf. or someone who has throat problems isn't able to like project. Well, that would be a major hindrance to like they can't even get up to the basic floor of like professional raw talent in this field. All right. But let's assume that you can do the thing kind of, right? So the raw talent piece would be when I was 15, I went over to a friend's house to spend the night, have like a slumber party kind of situation. And he was literally sitting on his bed with pillows around him, looking like toms and a snare on a drum set, and was just beating them with chopsticks, listening to music. And I was like, that's interesting. And he's like, I've been watching drummers and this is what they do. And he's kind of showing me like, putting his hand across for the hi-hat and doing toms and stuff. And I remember thinking, I'd like to try that. And so he was like, hey, you come here, and so I did it and I felt like it was easy for me. And so within a few weeks, I found myself in the church, at our church's like youth room, had a drum set. And I asked the drummer, could I just sit here and see what this is like? And he's like, sure. So I just started doing it. And pretty quickly I can do the independence dexterity thing with hands and feet, right? So I'm doing kick and hi-hat. And I'm not great at it, but I've hit the floor. Does that make
Right.
sense? Like
It's there.
lots of people, and this as a musician, lots of people can never do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, people who are great at piano and they've already been using their foot with a pedal, they might could transition to that. Right. So I had the raw talent for that. Well, I had taken piano lessons before that, but I had never considered myself in any way musical. Well, that kind of opened the door for me to say, what's music and what's my role in music? And do I have a gift? I wouldn't have been thinking that consciously, but I'm saying I was starting to do that. So within 2 or 3 years of that, I'm in a band, I'm writing songs, hitting little chords on guitar, I'm playing on the piano some. I'm a drummer in multiple bands, mediocre, but I'm playing drums. And looking back,
You mean mediocre?
and looking back, sorry, I played drums like a producer and a writer more than like a drummer, right? I mean, I was playing stuff that made them think I was good because I knew what to do to make a song work, right? But I wasn't like ever going to be awesome, right? So I didn't have the interest in like refining the raw talent I had in that area because I knew I wasn't great, and the work ethic I had in that area was so low, right? But my suck meter was high enough that I knew, Ross, you're just okay at this, right? Because I would see other drummers and be like, oh my gosh, they are just blazing so effortlessly. They have so much more independence, so much more creativity. All that to say, that was an assessment of my raw talent. All right. And I can remember it very well because it was important to me to kind of see, and again, I'm sitting here saying it takes a suck meter to understand your raw talent, right? There are folks who think that they're incredible and they aren't. Reality TV is full of people who believe themselves to be important to the world stage in some performance way, and they are mocked by the world or whatever, right? Unfortunately. So there's a lot of kind of interconnected Venn diagram stuff there, right? So yeah, that's how I would say, sort of discover your raw talent by looking at your musical journey and seeing where it was easy for you, where it was tougher, where you ran into obvious areas of struggle and kind of you hit walls of like progress. You couldn't go any farther. That'll tell you. And then kind of compare that in contrast to the people in your life who do similar things. And you'll probably have a sense of your raw talent. And hopefully it won't be terrible news to you. Hopefully you already kind of know this.
Something about this whole concept that's like mind blowing to me is like, okay, for instance, the idea of the drumming, right? Like the raw talent there is to be able to separate your extremities in a rhythmic and time based way. But that particular type of raw talent will go into other areas too. You know, so it's not just like you have raw talent to be a basic drummer. It's no, that can go like you can have raw
Or this
talent have a way with
musicality kind of stuff.
right,
Right.
exactly. Or as a lyricist, you can write words, but also you could probably write blogs. You could also write articles. You could edit. There's the raw talent is not like you're stuck. Like for instance, I'm thinking of my son Henry. He's just starting to play soccer. It's his first season. He's 6 years old. All the kids are older than him, and he goes out there and he dominates. He gets like 6 or 7 goals per game. He
Mm-hmm.
has no training. He just has raw talent in soccer. But that doesn't mean, but also he doesn't love to run up to the goal and kick it in. He loves to do, I call it the Happy Gilmore shots. He'll kick like halfway shots because his raw talent is like, he's got good hand-eye coordination, I guess foot-eye coordination, and he's got a strong kick that he can put the ball in the goal. So that raw talent is there. Obviously, all the coaches are like, oh, he's played before. It's like he's never played before because his raw
Right.
talent is in that area. But it's like, where else does that spread out? Because I'll see him in the backyard here. He'll be kicking the basketball into the hoop like a dude perfect guy. Like he just has this skill athletically. And so I wanted to bring up that point to where like just because you have a raw talent area in one or don't, like it can spread out into other realms, you know.
Well, yeah, and what you're also bringing up is the unfairness of it, and we have to just deal with that. Like raw
Right.
talent, the assessment of raw talent is going to reveal the unfairness of life.
Yeah.
Okay, like, and I've told you this. You know, when we were discussing this episode a couple of weeks ago, I told you this. You know, I have two sons. Sam is 19 and Jude is 16, and they played football together. Sam's like a senior. He was held back, so he's a senior this year, and he he loves football and is completely understands it like at like a deep level, like intuitive level, almost to me as a very non-sports guy, I feel like he understands it at like a psychic level.
Mm,
And but he's 5'9", 140,
yeah.
and Jude, my 16-year-old, is 6'2", 6'3", 250. It looks like he was made in a lab for football. I mean, like everywhere we go, everyone thinks he's a college player,
Wow.
and he just looks like a football player. And Jude likes football; he likes it. I mean, but he's insanely gifted at it. So on any given week, watching them play, Sam sometimes, who is not as gifted at it physically, you know, his raw talent physically for it is going to be lower by a lot. And his, you know, the raw talent meaning also his size, the way the Lord made him, the way God made him, right? So
Mhm.
it's much lower, but his work ethic is insane for it. His suck meter, meaning his intuition for how to do it and for what's good and bad, is very high. And how is he in a room? Well, he motivates the entire team, right?
Mm,
And so he makes up for it. And so on the field, they're almost equals. They play about as much. Now, if you took them to a college level, forget it, right?
right.
But they play, you know, at this level, Sam is able to sort of match Jude's talent with these other three things,
Mm,
and doesn't make Sam a better, you know, they're both good at it. And Jude has a future in football, and Sam probably doesn't have a future in like playing just because of his size, only because of the raw talent. And
mm,
that, you know, again, now we're getting to like, you know, standards of like the industry that you're in and all that. But I'm just trying to say you can take these two things and Sam's abilities. Now you get into like collaborative, the impact of collaboration. Sam's abilities in all these other areas have helped Jude, and
mm,
Jude's ability has helped Sam, but because Sam like gets motivated to like, you know, be as tough and as whatever physically strong as Jude. So they're actually working towards each other in a bunch of ways and complementing each other. So all this stuff has a lot of practical sense, like you're saying, for just life. I mean, you would see that you could take these categories, and the exact way you define the four categories might change a little, but you could take them into all kinds of things, you know, and say, you know, how good is someone going to be in this kind of a career, in a much different kind of a career that's not artistic. It probably works in some left-brained, you know, other ways too, right? And I'm sure it works in the physical sports kind of realm too. The sort of bad news is if you don't have a ton of raw talent and you discover that, it's going to feel discouraging. And you're going to think life isn't fair. But we have to remember that probably all these things, all four of them, were put into us by God at some
mm.
level. And we have, the great news is the other three, we do have some control. You know, even with raw talent, you have control over how much you refine it. But I
Mhm.
mean, but in these other three categories, you have a lot of control about how you can combine those with your raw talent to create the best possible thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to me when my first instrument was bass. My parents wanted me. I was interested in playing bass because my friend played guitar, and I was like, "Well, if I'm gonna have a band, I need to play the. You know, he does guitar lessons. I'll do bass. Who even knows what bass is?" So my parents were like, "Listen to see if you can pick out the bass lines and songs." So that was like my first challenge into music. And then when I
Mm,
got a bass, I held it, and you know, my dad came in and showed me how to play "Smoke on the Water," which is like probably the first song anyone learns on bass or guitar, or at least in my world. So I could do it, raw talent wise, but like it hurt my fingers. And I was like, I kind of hate this. So I get like a quarter, I had like a thumb. I tried all these things. And then eventually I just slid it under the bed. And I was like, I don't know. Even though I had the raw talent to be able to rhythmically do it, I didn't have the work ethic yet or the
yeah,
inspiration to realize that I really
right.
wanted to actually pursue that. Until one day I was listening to my favorite band at the time, Green Day, and they have this easy song called Brain Stew, and it's like the easiest song ever. But I pulled the bass out and I played along with the song because my raw talent allowed me to do that.
Mm,
And so, but then I was like, I'm basically in the band now, and I literally have never stopped since that moment. Like,
right.
of course, I don't just do bass at this point, but like the work ethic was missing yet. but
Yeah.
then when those I had just enough work ethic to be like, okay, I had some inspiration to get me into that. Then I was able to, like we talked about in the beginning, like the gold of whatever that is in me to be able to play bass or an instrument in general was like there. And I did just enough to like chip off a little bit to get to that gold. And that set
Right.
me on a trajectory that I'm still living 25 years later or
Right.
whatever.
I've thought about adding a fifth one, like drive, but I think work ethic covers that, because the problem with adding just drive is if it doesn't produce work ethic, then it's useless. Does that make sense? Like, you know what I mean? Because there are people who are like, man, this guy's got so much drive, he's got so much motivation. It's like, yeah, but that has to play out in some practical way. You know what I mean? Like, and
Right.
I think work
Passion.
ethic,
Yeah.
yes, I think work ethic is the proof of passion and drive,
Yeah.
right? So that's I've before wondered, hey Ross, is there a fifth one? Is it more like just like motivation? And it's like, yeah, but if you're not going to do something with that motivation, it doesn't really matter. And so I've kind of thought of like the motivation, is played out with work ethic, played out with how are you in a room, you know what I mean? Because you've listened to like interviews with like Ryan Tedder, and his drive is insane, but it basically results in that his how is he in a room and his work ethic are crazy. Like both are just insane.
Yeah. I've talked about grit a lot, and that is
Yes.
just
Yes.
working. You just keep, and work ethic is grit, at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day. I mean, you have to have there has to be some passion, or else you're just literally a robot, and you're not going to
Right.
do it unless there's passion there to put the work in. And that was with me. Like, I had no inspiration to play because I didn't understand what bass was, but until I could apply it to be like, wow, I can play with this CD or whatever.
Right.
Now the passion's there and the work ethic will follow.
So let me ask you this: when as we've it's been like a couple of months we've been talking about this, and obviously you and I have been talking about these ideas for a couple of years.
Yeah.
When you first heard me list these things, and maybe when you accepted, okay, Ross isn't wrong about this or whatever, right? At whatever level you're like, okay, I believe this enough to think Ross is right. How did you grade yourself?
I
Or like
mean,
today, how do you grade how would you grade those things? And just be honest, like, well, like which things do you think you are best and worst at?
I think
I think we
obviously,
all want to say our raw talent isn't very high. We all are like, oh, I'm just, but, and I don't know if that's true for you. I mean, I actually do believe that about singing. I don't think that about my creativity. I think my creativity raw talent is very, very high. But anyway, go ahead. So what do you think yours are?
yeah, I mean, like you're saying in order, like worst to best.
I don't know, or just tell me about the way you
Yeah.
feel about them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say obviously for me, foundationally, it all begins with raw talent. I have to have
Yeah,
some measure. My
right.
dad was a drummer. My mom played flute in high school. Like, there's music
Mm-hmm.
in my blood. So, like, that's there. But I think the work ethic is the next natural step in the process, because you don't have to be in a room yet to have work
Right.
ethic, right? Like, you just have to sit there and play bass for 5 years. You have to sit in Logic and work on, your craft for 5, 10, whatever it is. So I would say, like, I've had that ability. Like, once I get my mindset, because I've been chasing music since I've discovered it. When I was 14 years old, my mom asked me if I wanted a CD player for Christmas or something. I was like, for what? Like, I really hadn't caught it at all. I was just into sports. But as soon as I did, it's been like this wild, just like laser focus. I mean, I met Susie from inviting her to come see my band play. Like, music has always been like foundational bedrock for
Mm,
my life since
right.
that happened. So I think work ethic is critical. And then I think, because of my personality type, I think the How Are You in a Room has been something that's really pulled me into places I'd never really got to. I would never belong based on my raw talent at all. I think I've been able to go, and God's put me in spots to where, like, I've got to meet people or work with people or write with people, and I just have some sort of personality where people are like, I don't hate that guy that much enough to
Mm-hmm.
bring him back or whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that, or build even the like the CIS community. Like all the things that we're doing. That the personality, how are you in a room has to be like the thing that gets you called back to the room. Because if you have raw talent and really good work ethic and you just like crush it on your craft, but then like no one likes you, then you're not going
Right.
to get to share it with anybody because you're not going to get invited to do anything. And I think the fourth one for me, and the one that I'm always working on, I feel the weakest at, is the suck meter, because like I told you a couple weeks ago, like I feel like everything I do, I'm in this loop where everything I do is corny. And I know that's
Right.
not true, but I feel like I'm constantly trying, because I feel like for me, that's the hardest thing to get which is ironic because of what it is, but like
Right.
understanding your own suck meter, because I can't just constantly ask people like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? I mean, I always send you my stuff because you're gracious and you'll listen. But like for
But
me,
why can't
that's
you keep? But you said you can't keep asking that. I think you can. I think you have to.
yeah, I think you have to. Yeah. I
I
maybe
mean,
that's just yeah, I just feel like I don't want to like wear anybody out. Like, oh,
look,
here comes
if
another
your
thing.
stuff was, I mean, look, we're on a podcast here, and this is more of
Yeah.
a private conversation. But if your stuff was bad, then that would be frustrating for people. Your stuff's never bad. Like even
Right.
when it needs a lot of improvement, it's not like I'm hearing it going, oh man, I hate that Brian sent me something else I have to endure for 2 minutes. It's not
Yeah.
you've got good music. When it needs work, that's okay. Like I think the problem with the suck meter thing is only like you've already crossed over the threshold of the problematic suck meter situation, which is when I talk about we've had this discussion when we did the podcast about it. If you don't understand what that is or understand where to start, you are in trouble with it probably.
Right.
You at least are like warring with it. So, dude, and I've told you this a bunch of times, privately, but I am 50 years old, been doing this since I was 23 professionally, and 7 or 8 more years than that as a amateur. So 30 something years I've been creating music. I mean, longer than a lot of people who listen to this podcast have even been on this earth. And I'm telling you, my suck meter for a lot of that time was terrible. And it actually has 3 stages, kind of, generally speaking. Or I could probably make it 10, but for now, let's just say 3. Stage 1, I don't even know to have one. I think I'm great. I'm
Right.
just making music, and no one I know is telling me that it sucks. And those who occasionally do, I'm able to say they don't get it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's a big chunk. A second chunk is where you are. I'm getting that it's not as good as it can be, but I don't quite know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm bothered that it could be better, and that is probably the longest stage for most of us.
Mm.
And hopefully it is, because it's you working out, how do I figure out what's wrong with what I'm doing? How do I make it better? I always joke, we're a bunch of doctors who know how to diagnose a disease and have zero clue how to fix it.
Mm.
Yes, I'm certain you have this problem.
Right.
What do you do to fix it? I don't know. Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of a lot of us.
Yeah.
Third stage, all right, I kind of know what to do about it, and I'm going to do that, right? And I guess a fourth stage is like somewhere shy of heaven. Maybe you're like, I know what to do always, and I do it exactly right, and I'm awesome. That's who Ryan Tedder is, or something, right?
Yeah.
That's where that is. But I'm in that stage 3 of I've got a decent suck meter after all this time. Again, this is like 5 years old, maybe, that I feel
Right.
this way.
Yeah.
And I even told you, I think I told you recently, like within the last like year, like since Unfinished, since my record came out, I've realized, oh, I know exactly what I do wrong a lot of the time, and I know I can see now over like 25 years of making records, the things that bother me in the records that I've made, and I'm just not going to do that again. I've identified it, and I'm sure there's something I'm missing, right? But I'm saying, I'm getting like I am making this thing. I'm chiseling this knife with a flint down to the most, razor sharp, like that filament wire, like fishing line sharp for my suck meter, And so all that to say, like, the good news for you is you're past that first problematic stage, which is you don't even know what a suck meter is, or even to think, is my stuff good,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or even to listen to someone who says this could be better, And a lot of our listeners, I just beg you, if you find yourself resisting critique more often than not, you need to work on that. You
Mm.
the But again, it's about goals. If you don't
Right.
care if you have any kind of a audience, then just make music. But then stop acting. But then stop caring about it inside. Right? Don't be mad that no one gets you. Like
Mm-hmm.
the joke. For the musician, the most common joke that people say about us is, yeah, I do this like blues, folk, Americana thing, and my songs are like stories and they're like 7 minutes long, and just nobody freaking gets it, man. They don't get it. These sellouts, they just want me to be a pop star, and I'm just trying to do something significant. And it's like, hey, man, no one likes that. No one likes that. So if you're okay making music that no one likes, just for you, go ahead. I've written music for therapy purposes.
Mhm.
But if you care about having impact, then there is some level of gatekeeping and selling out and caring about the audience that you got to do. And anyone who tells you they've never cared what anyone thinks about their music, they're lying.
Right.
You've never heard of those people.
Mm.
Anyone that you've heard of cares about being heard. Quote. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, but does that make sense? Like, you're not going to
Yeah.
get famous by accident because you're just so good and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you guys were all watching me. Thousands of people. It's like, no, you have to care. And so I'm ranting now, but what I'm saying
Yep.
is that you care about your suck meter. That's a major step, and you're working at it, and your music is already really good. So when you're coming to me, like yesterday, you showed me this song, and I'm like, dude, this is like 80% really good, and 20% has to be improved.
Yeah.
You know,
Which I
and
got a
if that
revision for you.
and if that 80%, you're great. If that 80% wasn't as good as it is, I maybe wouldn't even care to tell you about that 20%, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry, I'm ranting, but
No,
I just
I have two
I'm
thoughts.
so done with one second. I'm so done with people who act like they don't care about critique, but are still getting critique and are still trying to put themselves out there.
Mm.
It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So one is about the suck meter, and it's honestly because of you and I hanging out that I have understood, and you give me the ability, and obviously not every single person listening can like send you stuff. They can obviously,
Please don't.
yeah, or book a coaching call with him because a lot of people do, and it's awesome. So
There
there's
you
another
go.
plug. I'll put
There
that
you go.
link underneath the t-shirts. But secondly,
Yes.
like just me knowing that I'm just not doing it just because, like, it's accountability is critical. So I know that, like, before I even sent you that thing yesterday as a real example, I had already tweaked it like for a few days. It wasn't like I was just like, here's the first idea I have. It was like, no, I am already thinking like, I want this. And I knew that the line that we talked about was probably not the one, but I still was at a spot where I was kind of stuck, and I was like, I need to get
Yeah.
his thought on it. So,
And maybe I would have said, dude, I love it all. And you'd have been like, okay, I'm being too picky, right? That maybe
right.
that,
But it's that internal suck meter development. Cause yeah, for me, it's like, I'm always trying to do things that are gonna be like, this is at a pro level consistently, and the only way to get there is to, first of all, know what the pro level is, but two, have the capacity to actually work hard enough, use your work ethic to be able to try to push it there instead of just, it's a that'll do thing. But what I wanted to say is, and this is probably
that'll do,
transition.
donkey. That'll
Yeah,
do.
that'll do, donkey. Is which Shrek is awesome because it's a kids movie, but it's especially the first one. I mean, they're dropping some
Dude,
light
go back and
cussing and
watch
stuff.
it. It's very not PC. There is
No,
a
not at
bunch
all.
of like super uncomfortable, inappropriate jokes in there that would not work anymore.
That's why it's so funny. But
Yeah, it's true.
so what I wanted to say, and this will transition probably in the second half, is raw talent is not enough. Right?
Exactly.
It's not enough.
And no, yes, exactly. That's exactly right. Because, my son who's huge, he still has to work at it dude, that you're so right. Like it's where that sort of distilling process of going from, you're a big fish in a small pond to like being peers. And this is one reason why CIAS is so good, is that a lot of people are showing up at CIAS being the most talented person that they kind of know. Or maybe in their circle, they're among the more talented people in this area.
Right.
And I mean, dude, I've told you these stories, but when I was a kid, I made, in the late 90s, I'm making independent Christian music, and nobody is. The internet doesn't even exist yet. So no one's aware of other indie Christian music. So I'm a big deal by virtue of just, they don't know anybody else. So I think I'm a big deal. And
You're
so
the
at
only
that point,
deal.
yes, exactly. And so at that point, my raw talent is all that I'm really having to use. A little bit of work ethic, a little bit. How are you in a room? No suck meter. I'm just raw talent. And then, I had this conversation with that friend. I think I shared on the podcast where he says, I like your music, but I wouldn't pay for it. I wouldn't, volunteer to chase after it, engage it, whatever. And I'm like, oh, he's saying in order to be good, Ross, do you want just your friends to listen to this and your family, or do you want fans who've never met you? And like, oh, well, and I'd never even considered that. And so, that's pushing me. Then I get out of college and this becomes my job. And suddenly I'm having to compete with other worship leaders and other singer-songwriters to get people's ears and people's money and all of that, gigs, and I'm starting to realize, hey, when a youth pastor or when a college pastor or when a coffee house, whatever, or when a radio promoter, whatever is deciding what to do with their venue, with the slot that they have, I'm competing for that slot with other really talented people,
Mm.
many of whom are more talented than me. And so, you just continue to do that. And for those of you, who are listening, who've done any kind of co-writing, especially through CIS, you're bumping into these different people and you're saying, whoa, that person, someone like a Chelsea,
Mm-hmm.
Chelsea nails a lyric so fast and she comes with ideas and she's got a lyric and she's killing a lyric, really quickly. And
Yeah.
she has melody ideas too, but she's coming with a lyric and it's good. And if you're not a person who's ever worked with a lyricist, and you're like, I've never heard of this woman, and she's really good. We've worked with several people that are like this,
Yep.
who are really talented, and we just assume because they're indie like us that we'll be just as good or better than they are at all the things,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's good to to see as you kind of advance through these different sort of levels of your career and seasons of life. There are people who are working at this, I mean, dude, there's a guy named Ethan Hulse who wins, BMI and CCM Songwriter of the Year every year. I was sitting on a mutual friend of ours back porch 6-7 years ago, and Ethan's nobody, and he says, "I'm going to write every day because I want this to be my job. I'm going to work hard at it. I'm going to work really hard." And here's the deal: I don't think Ethan is way better in raw talent than me or a lot of other writers, and that's not a slight on Ethan. This is I'm going to tell you something awesome about him, but his work ethic and
Mm.
his how are you in a room, man, he nails that stuff at a level that like really, really convicts me, and he just said, I'm gonna write every day. I'm gonna write every day. And I didn't want to do that, and the fruit is in Ethan is winning Dove Awards and all kinds every year, now. And we were peers, very much peers on that back porch. He was not getting more cuts than me. He was probably getting less cuts than me at the time. And he just put in the time. That's a moment where our raw talent, probably if you put us in like some kind of experiment and said, what's your raw talent? It probably comes up pretty equal.
Mm-hmm.
And Ethan would probably say like, oh, Ross is a really good songwriter. I mean, we're friends and he would say that, I mean, he likes my music. So, and so he would humbly be like, Ross is just as talented as I am. But we would both know the subtext. Ethan works hard. Ethan's great in a room. Ethan's suck meter is great. He's better than I am at all those things. Just period. I can choose to be mad about that or be like, you know what, that's inspiring to me. I'm going to fight and try to be better at that. Right. And so as we go through these different things, raw talent, you're right. Raw talent is going to sort of hit its like maximum capacity for impact. This is as much as your raw talent can do. What else are you going to add to that formula? And that's kind of what, I wanted this episode to be, was us talking about when you realize what your raw talent is, as much as you can realize it, what do you do? And for Ethan on that back porch, it was, I'm going to write every day. I'm going to make more friends in this business. I'm going to write songs that don't matter so that later on I can get invited back to write songs that do.
Mm.
I'm going to, write with people that no one's ever heard of because maybe they're going to get famous, or maybe they know someone, or maybe they are just a good investment of time. I'm going to care about people. I'm going to be a good hang. He did all those things. He made choices to deal with the amount of raw talent, which he has a lot of talent. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's not like it's some kind of unfair lottery where he just woke up with more talent than the rest of us, And it's actually, here's the funny thing. Raw talent can be a way that we excuse someone else's success versus ours. Well, yeah, they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
They're amazing. And look, there's just not, you can do that. There's no mileage in that. You're not going to get anywhere with that.
Right.
Make an assessment of where you are and then adjust, and then, bring in the other parts of the formula. To use a really dumb metaphor, I made oatmeal this morning, and if I wanted to put brown sugar in it and I realized there's no brown sugar in the pantry, what else I got in there? I got honey, I got stevia, whatever, right? Add something to the formula, to the recipe, if you don't have the thing that you need. And we all may wish we had more raw talent. And look, if you've got a ton of raw talent, God bless you. But I also say this: to whom much is given, much is expected. So if you got a whole lot of raw talent, for goodness sakes, do not waste that. Lean in and keep adding work ethic. And because that's the hard thing, guys, is that those with raw talent aren't motivated a lot of times. Like,
Yeah.
my raw talent for like creativity is pretty high. So I don't always take seriously, like, if I have an assignment to write a song for something, I don't worry that I'm going to get it. And that can be okay. That takes some stress out of my life, but it also can result in me kind of being lazy occasionally because I'm like, I got that,
Right.
or like my raw talent, like to sort of do things on a stage with my music my sort of gift for it at this point is pretty honed. It's pretty refined. And so I don't always like get super like concerned about doing, what's my concert going to be like this weekend? What am I going to do? I'll just be like, I'll be fine. It's not I'm phoning it in. I don't always worry or think how excellent can I be? And so all that to say, like, we got to keep pushing ourselves and realizing whatever you have in that sort of raw form, you've got to add things to it, in accordance with what other skills that you have.
That made me think raw talent only matters, or I should say it like this: other people's raw talent only matters if you guys are in the room together. Otherwise, you can let it, like, jealousy, whatever, like, oh man, they're so much better. Oh man, they're vocal, whatever. You don't know how much work ethic it took them to get there. Because at the end of the day, we don't really know people's raw talent unless we happen to be there when everyone picks up an instrument for the first time. Like, we don't know. So like with Ethan Hulse, right? Like, no one would necessarily know that story, but nowadays, if you look at almost like every song that comes out on Spotify, you see his name there,
Right.
but you don't see the conversation that you happen to be there for, to see what he did to get there. So the
Yeah.
raw talent really matters in other people if you're working together, because then their
Right.
raw talent complements yours. Otherwise,
That's
it's
right.
probably just going to be a hindrance to you, because you're just going to say, oh, well, I'll never be as good as them but
Right.
that's not
That's right.
true, you know?
That's right.
Because you have your own skill set. And just like when I go back and listen to like my old songs, I don't think they're good, but I'm like, oh, that still sounds like decent to me. Now, maybe it's just because it's my baby or whatever, but like at the end of the day, like, I had the same raw talent then as I do now. It's just
Mm-hmm.
I've spent a lot of time trying to refine those other areas that, like you said, we can control the other
Right.
three. And so whether consciously or not, and I think that's probably the one of the biggest pieces of this is the intention. Once you know, and that's the hardest part though too. I remember the first time I started going to like Nashville and taking trips and doing songwriting things, like, oh man, I can't just write the random things that make me feel good in the moment. I actually have to try at this now. This is a lot
Right.
harder to do
Right.
it, because now I know better, because there was a suck meter now. Before that,
Yes.
it was just free reign. And honestly, how was I getting any better? Maybe, but probably not. Especially compared to now, when we're like,
Right.
we're doing the intensives and stuff, we're doing these songwriting retreats, and like we're writing with the same people. And like, even seeing, like you mentioned Chelsea before, like Chelsea, I met Chelsea probably in 2020, 29. It was a while ago, 2019 maybe, where she was just starting. And we've written
Mm-hmm.
together probably 15 to 20 times, I bet. And I'm picking on Chelsea because she's awesome. And everyone listening knows that too, because they've probably written with her because she's written with everybody. But like,
Yeah.
what she can do now, her raw talent's the same. But because
Right.
she spent so much time in a room, because her work ethic is strong, and because her suck meter is going bananas, like,
Right.
she can just bring solid ideas. Like, wow, like this song "Sad Summer" we just did. Like, we did this song with Brittany and Caitlin and Chelsea, and it was just this
Mm-hmm.
random song, but like, it turned out so good. Susie was like, "You should release it." I'm like, "Yeah," and that happens only because, one, we want to do something fun, but two, because like everybody's suck meter in the room was at a level to where like we all were kind of chasing this cool idea, and the result of that is a fun song that none of us expected. But that didn't just come because everyone has raw talent. It became because of those other areas too.
And and this is just all just a reminder that you don't get better accidentally. You
Mm.
get better because you do it, because you try, because you identify these areas. And I could easily see someone bumping into this podcast that we're doing, these episodes, and bumping
Hmm.
into like my video course or any number of resources, maybe even your video course, and saying these guys are turning us into some kind of like science to make money. And it's like, look, this is my job. And also, I don't want to say it's prideful. I fully intend to leave a legacy of important songs.
Mm.
That's what I want to do. And by important, I don't mean like changing the vast culture. I'm saying I want my art, when my children and grandchildren and anybody who interacts with me later, I want people to interact with that music and think this mattered. This guy cared about this. This this guy cared about the world and about the kingdom of Jesus and about art and about excellence. And I want them to bump into my sync songs, which are completely unimportant,
Mhm.
sort of content wise, and my, seahorses, and my most like CCM, for someone else songs,
And
and
then Love
my
is a
Ross
Hammer.
King, yeah, and Love is a Hammer, right? And I want them to see all of that and see, man, this guy cared about doing this well. And because I care a lot about it. And if that's not your goal, that doesn't make you like a bad person.
Right.
So when you're listening to this, what we're not saying is everyone has to get super serious about doing this in this way. That's not what we're saying. We're saying if you're satisfied with where your music career is and where your music ability is, why are you even listening to this? Thanks for your ears. But
Yeah.
this is for the unsatisfied, and again, not unsatisfied with life. I'm saying who hungry. This is for the hungry.
Mm.
And at 50, 30 years into this, I'm hungry still. And again, not hungry to like get richer. I mean, I'm sure I want to pay my bills. I'm saying I'm hungry to get better. Like it
Hmm.
thrills me when I do something and think me 5 years ago wouldn't have done that. That thrills me. It thrills me whenever I have a co-write and I handle some difficulty of the co-write with more grace, with more like adept, sort of artistic or social skill. I'm so happy when that happens. And that's what I want for you, whoever you are. And I want for you and me, Brian, is I want us to keep growing in those things so we're better at this. And the raw talent piece matters because it tells you what else you need to be doing,
Yeah.
right? And like you said a minute ago, a person can have raw talent, a lot of it, and they'll need to do these things.
Hmm.
But it's almost a disadvantage for some of them because they don't have to work as hard to like be noticed. And you could even say, I want to be careful here, but you could even say that some of the raw talent piece is stuff like, "Are you beautiful?"
Mm.
We've talked about like a Phil Wickham or something. Like,
Yeah.
look, here's a fact: Phil Wickham doesn't have to work as hard as some people because he looks like that. I don't care what you can laugh at that. You can say Ross is. I don't. You're wrong. That guy looks like he does. That matters.
Hmm.
I mean, it just matters. God
Yeah.
gave him that. We can get mad that we don't have as good of a jawline, as good a hair as he's got, or whatever it is. We can get mad at that. It's a fact, and it's a fact that Phil can probably make a less good product and get away with it, and or that Phil can get into rooms that we can't get into because of some of that. You know what? Praise the Lord. Phil is really super crazy talented, a great
Hmm.
writer, by all accounts, a wonderful human being. He's giving the church songs to sing, and whatever. I just am picking on him. He's amazing. I'm saying it does impact the world when you look like that. Okay. And we can't change that, right? We can't change it. But if okay, well, I don't look like Phil Wickham. I'm gonna do some other things that are going to like push me into this other place, and there are people that just, out of their mouths, they just sing easily, really beautifully. I mean,
Hmm.
we've talked about Michael Farron a lot. Michael Farron is just so good at
Yeah.
presenting things. He's just so good at it. He plays well. He sings well. He was raised by people who made music for a living. He was a child traveling evangelist playing and singing on stage at like 8 years old, right?
Yeah. And
That's
you
about
could
as
tell.
raw as it gets. Yeah, that's about as raw as it gets. And so he comes into a room with so much raw talent that he's refined so
Hmm.
much, right? And those things matter, but you just have to be honest about that and say, okay, well, those are true things about that. I'll just adjust. I mean, I don't know if you've done this before, but my wife and I are always laughing at like the Hugh Jackman people of the world are like, okay, this guy's like handsome,
Hmm.
he's ripped, he has a kind of body that can get easily ripped. He's funny by all accounts. He's really kind and winsome and humble. He can sing amazing. He can dance amazing. I mean, what kind of a lottery? What kind of genetic lottery is that, right?
I mean,
Well,
if you're Wolverine and the Greatest Showman, that's a wide
and
spectrum
the
of
Music
things.
Man, yes, exactly. No, I mean, it's crazy that the guy can do all those things. And look, I can bemoan that and be like, oh, the world isn't fair. It's not fair,
Right.
right? And Jesus didn't do anything wrong, and we killed him. Okay, so the world's not fair, and just learn what you can from that and make adjustments and add to the places where there's deficits. Add your surpluses to those things and adjust. And I'll tell you this: my work ethic is way different than it used to be because I've become more honest about some of the things, right?
Hmm.
And my suck meter is way better than it used to be. And how my in room is constantly changing because I'm leaving rooms saying, "How were you today, Ross?" I do that. I ask those questions. I read productivity articles and blogs and watch productivity YouTube videos and read productivity books. And because I'm not my work ethic, my ethic is high, but I'm not an organized enough person to understand always the best way to work, and we talked about some of this in our work ethic one, but there's just I'm a self-employed musician from Texas. I'm a transplant who didn't grow up in the Nashville system. I have to do a bunch of work. I wasn't raised by musical geniuses who, took me on the road. I don't have any of that. I just back there somewhere in my brain and my heart is a lot of creativity. Thank you, God. But I had to. I mean, it is about as raw. It's a lot, I think, but
Mm.
it was very very raw, and I have had to really really refine it. And I think you could almost say, and I'm saying this off the cuff, so I may decide I'm wrong later, but you could almost say that the refinement process of your raw talent is the other three things.
Mm.
Does that make sense? It's like we're almost using those other three things to refine that raw talent.
I was thinking of it that way as you were just talking. It's like
Yeah.
it's like the blood that pumps through the rest of the body,
Mm.
right? Like because the raw talent is the origin story for every person who's done anything,
Mm-hmm.
like even outside of music. I know that's a grandiose statement, but it's true. Like whatever makes in okay, so spiritualizing it, like God put that in you. Maybe that the raw talent equals just the giftings and the blessings that you have, which is your calling. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the fuel that the other refining pieces, how are you in a room, your work ethic and your suck meter refine the gifts that God's given you to do what you're called to do.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And I mean, what else could it be? Why else would we have the raw talent if we're not supposed to use it to glorify
Right.
God with it? It's not like an accident. It's not like we just evolved from nothing and like we randomly can do these certain things. That's our giftings.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're here. So that
Right.
is why we do these podcasts. And that's why CIS is a thing, is because we feel like it's our role to help inspire you. And sometimes it's with a little bit of rub, but like we all feel that. But that's what takes us from just the raw talent we've been given and actually refine it. Because at the end of the day, like you're saying, if people don't care to do that, that's totally fine. It takes a ton of pressure off. But if you are, and if God's given you that, we're not wasting it because we're actually refining it. And that's what will make it go further than it could have
Right.
ever without doing that. Any other thoughts you want to add? I mean, I feel like we've covered a lot of amazing ground here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I would just say that if there's a way for people to tell us, okay, you've covered these four things, I think there's probably we've probably cracked open some things in these four
Mm-hmm.
that need further talking. We need to kind of expound a little bit on some of this stuff or to dive deeper. And I don't really know what that would be. I've listened to them all to make sure I didn't say something dumb or that I don't need to tell you to edit out something dumb that I said. I don't know what, this is all stuff that's been, you and I have been talking about for months and years. So
Yeah.
so I am curious, anybody who wants to give feedback on, okay, now that we've kind of talked about this, here's something that here's a question that raises, and I'd
Mm.
love to hear more because I enjoy talking about this, and I do think it's helpful, and a lot of this is me just like saying, hey man, this has been my journey, and I hope it helps, but I wonder if there's some areas that we could talk more about. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, so if you're watching this on YouTube, just literally comment it below, and if you don't want it to be public, you can go to the CIS Facebook group, which of course will be linked below, and you can throw a comment out there or send either one of us a message, because this is the four ingredients of this, but obviously we have a pretty significant list of the next topics to come, but we want to serve you exactly where you are. So if you got a specific
Mm-hmm.
question, yeah, just let us know. We'd love to do that. But yeah, let me pray, and then that'll be it. We'll close it up. So God, thank you
Love it.
so much for your guidance and direction in this conversation, Lord. We thank you for the raw talent, the measure that you've given each one of us, God. We know that even if maybe sometimes we wish that we had more raw talent in a specific area, that's not what you've necessarily called us to. And let us be okay with that. Let us be at peace with that, to know that maybe it requires more of a team. Maybe it requires more of Howard in a room, because we need to get into those rooms to where we can collaborate with other people who have the raw talent to get the messages and the blessings that you've put in us out there. And just let us know that it's okay to work. It's okay to put in the time, and sometimes it might take a long time to get to the place we go, but it's always worth it, because nothing is wasted in you, God.
Mm-hmm.
So let us rest and know that we've been given the exact talent that we need to have, the exact raw talent we need to have to be able to accomplish the purpose that you've put in us, Lord, and just be okay with that, and just put our hand to the plow, work as hard as we can, and then we know that you will handle the rest, God, because at the end of the day, it's all for you and through you. So we just have to put
Mm.
in the time that we can, be obedient to the calling, God, and just watch the amazing thing that you will do greater than we could ever imagine. Lord, we thank you so
Mm.
much for the direction on our lives, God. Let our raw talent just be, let us realize that our raw talent is enough and we can leave it there,
Mm.
God. In your name we pray.
Yes.
Amen.
Amen.